Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey there.
Well, we have another counterculture sexuality episode for you tonight, that of leaders or leadership. So the title is leaders. So we're talking about leadership and leaders. Well, what do you guys think a leader is?
The boss.
Okay, that's an interesting take on leaders. Uh,
Lost?
the boss.
The
Yeah.
boss.
Oh, boss.
Oh,
Okay, I can't hear.
the boss is the leader.
Okay, sure.
Okay, I'm just going with the superficial understanding
Okay.
starting out.
That is certainly an answer where you don't have a choice in who your leaders are. No, I mean I'm thinking of the military hierarchy. Yeah, your leader is also your boss, and you better do what he says.
Mhm.
Okay. Is that the is that the only definition of leader though?
No, there's plenty of them.
Well, I brought up the
Or
military one because I read the notes.
yeah, yeah. Well, didn't we have an episode on hierarchy, guys?
Recently too. Yes.
Yeah. So there's superiors, inferiors, and equals, and a leader is a
Superior.
superior. So one above in position or rank, or perhaps skill or age. But generally, leaders talking about authority, one who leads or conducts, a guide or a conductor, a chief, a commander, a captain, one who goes first. That's according to the 1828 Noah Webster's dictionary.
I like that one. I like the definition of one who goes first because when I really think of leading or leader, that's what I think of. You're leading the way.
Leading the charge.
There's
Like
also,
the old generals would lead up front.
Yeah. That
there's also a metaphorical aspect. Uh, for instance, if you look to men and women, men have more upper body strength, broad shoulders. And metaphorically, we can think that men were designed to carry a burden. Responsibility is a burden.
Yes.
So we like the masculine traits for a leader. A man who has broad shoulders, who can carry a burden, and who talks straight and is trustworthy. But because it's something about his physique that we believe that he is capable of carrying the burden of responsibility. That doesn't mean a
Okay.
smaller man cannot be a good leader because he can have the
Like
traits
Napoleon?
without the physique. Yes.
well, okay. So, but Steve, this is an interesting point, and I hope we get into it more later tonight. There is a belief that simply because you have the physical traits, therefore you are. And I think Napoleon's actually a great counterpoint to that. Nick, what's more important to a leader? The having the physical traits of a leader or having the mental traits of a leader?
Uh, Mental traits. Usually those under them require more of the physical traits. Not that you would sometimes require that of a leader,
Yeah.
but generally it's the mental traits.
Okay. So Napoleon's shortness didn't harm him in achieving his goals, his expansive
No.
goals. Yeah.
Well, in one way, it presents a smaller target.
Somewhat literally.
So in the red pill,
Yeah.
we talk about a high value man. And then we talk about the aspects or traits that a woman wants in a man. Oh, high income, six pack,
Six, six,
6 foot
six.
tall, Doesn't that superficially represent a leader?
It certainly does from the evolutionary biology standpoint, the
Sure.
external characteristics of a leader. Yes.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the man she chooses is a leader. But superficially, yeah, those aspects represent the ideal of the stature of a leader.
Sure. And, why did they go after? Well, I'll talk about that in the Bible later. But there was a certain guy who was chosen leader. He's a big guy. He's ultimately a failed leader, though.
Oh, you mean you can be a not be a leader and still have all the physical markings of a leader?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, just to drive the point home in summary, just because a man has the physical characteristics of leader does not mean he is. And it is a mistake that we were talking about heuristics last week. It's a mistake that our biological heuristics push us to make.
It's almost like it's like a certain political party in Germany, right? You're expecting to have all these biological markers, and that's automatically going to make you the most supreme being out there. They followed a certain
Oh.
philosophy, which we're going to talk about Monday.
Yes, we are going to talk about that on Monday. You're looking forward to Monday. I can tell.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it doesn't automatically make you a leader. I'm sorry, Jim Bros, red pill Jim Bros. I'm not saying working out's bad. I'm not saying being a tall guy's bad, but that doesn't automatically make you like the apex man, the Ubermensch, or anything like that. So,
Well, it's as a fun little note on the red pill side. I had a conversation back when I had just joined the streaming side of this community, and I pointed out, look, if I put a 5.56 through the base of your medulla oblongata, you're still dead instantly. I don't care how strong you are. Okay. It's like somebody,
yep,
it's like you got your strings cut like a marionette, like,
yep, done.
and I don't need to be strong to do that. I do need to be trained a little bit to do that, but women can do that. I've watched my wife do it to paper.
Isn't there something I remember someplace statistics about the guys who become SEALs?
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah.
not typically they're not typically 6 foot tall. They're not built like a
5'10".
brick shit house. They're 5'10", and they're kind
wiry,
of skinny, wiry. Yeah, a lot of muscle, but not the physique. They got the mental strength, and yeah, they're probably more agile, and they still have enough strength to get it done. But it's not the Ubermensch.
I was listening to an interview. It was Sean Ryan talking to another Navy SEAL. He's talking about going through BUDS, which is the SEAL selection program. And he said, "Oh yeah, the big guys, they don't usually make it through about 4 weeks. They don't usually, Hell Week is what they call it. They don't make it. Very rarely do they make it through Hell Week. We don't want them. Ask yourself this: the most apex predator in the world, SEAL Team 6, doesn't want muscle-bound gym bros. Now, why might that be?" And he actually gave the reason. He said it's very simple. The muscle-bound gym bros think that they're just going to muscle their way through this. Hell Week is first and foremost a mental exercise.
Yeah.
So, and what is leadership? First and foremost,
Mental fortitude. Well, there's other things. It's being able to go first when you can conduct or lead. I have something in a book, Robert E. Lee's book on leadership. Well, I'll quote it later by the author, but he gives the fundamentals of leadership, these things. 4 things: courage, intelligence, perseverance, and responsibility. Courage, intelligence, perseverance, and responsibility. There, I gave it away. There you go.
But Nick, you didn't say raw strength. Come on, dude. You got to fix this.
I guess Napoleon was a bad leader, He was a terrible general, Any other short dudes in history that were generals that we can think? I'm sure there's plenty out there, right?
Some of them we don't really know how tall they were.
Right.
I'm thinking Alexander the Great, but I don't know if anybody knows how tall he was.
Franco apparently was short, I guess. Huh.
Oh,
Um,
I looked it up. The AI says that we don't know, but Alexander the Great's height was estimated to be around 5'6" to 5'7".
Oh.
Dude was short. It was a short stack, and he only conquered the known world at the time.
Well,
Oh man,
That was
I guess
great.
there's hope for Rhinestone after all,
Yeah, there you go,
the joke
Ryan.
between
There
him
you
and
go.
Andrew Tate.
People were shorter back then.
That's true.
And,
But 5'6" was
the
short for
Southern
Europe.
Europe. Yeah, but he was in Southern Europe, right? What was he, Greek? Albania? I don't know. Where did he come from?
Yes, Macedonian.
Macedonia. Okay. Yeah, one of those down south places. But yeah, men down there are not known for their height, not like the Dutch. So, might have been below average, but it wasn't super short compared to other men of that time.
That's true enough.
So guys,
So, what do you got for us on leaders? Aside from physicality, ain't
I
it?
said fundamentals of leadership: courage, intelligence, perseverance, and responsibility. But yeah, strength is not there. Not that that's a bad thing to have. Height is not there. Intelligence. Oh, wasn't there a guy that had this book? There's like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and
Oh, Homer?
oh, yeah. Who is the protagonist there?
Odysseus.
Yeah, and he was a leader. What traits did he resemble?
Well, all of the ones you listed. I'm thinking about the how he approached the. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. How he approached the sirens, because the problem that he faced was he had to get past the sirens, and they, of course, if anybody heard, they would immediately, or heard or saw them, that they would immediately go towards them, and they couldn't help themselves. So he takes all of his men and he blinds them, all his rowers and stuff, and
Plug their ears or something?
yeah, and he plugged their ears. And so then he lashes himself to the top of his mast so that he can see, but he can't do anything to change the direction of the ship as they go past. That is fortitude and intelligence to be able to think that problem through, come up with a solution, and then gut it out when you've got, the theoretically the most beautiful women on the planet singing songs to you.
Sam, he still wanted to hear what they were singing.
Yes, he did. But he had to get past them and not get sucked in. So he came up with a way to do it.
And who is this patron, false goddess, right? Who is the patron false goddess of Odysseus?
That I'd have to look up. I don't remember I
haven't
studied.
Old Eye Athena, right?
Oh.
Goddess of wisdom,
right.
of Athens. Yeah. So he was a man of intelligence, of wisdom, of cunning. Cunning Odysseus is actually a lot of times his moniker. Cunning Odysseus. He was strong. He was a strategist. He had courage, and he was able to lead his men. He had perseverance. That dude had some perseverance. You read all the crap he had to go through.
Yes. Odysseus and Homer and the Iliad were. I was probably 8 or 9, so it's been a while. But
I had to
Yeah.
translate those in Greek in college. It was fun.
oof, yeah, no one ever made me
Yeah.
do that.
Oh,
Anyway,
it's fun.
but that's an interesting choice of leader example, because we don't often talk about him in that way. I mean, we talk about the perseverance side.
Well, it's because we have been raised generations of men without a proper classical education. People used to grow up hearing these stories. They didn't always accept their religion, but they could take the virtues of these men and bring it into their life, even if they're Christians or not.
That requires a little bit of wisdom and of the subset that we call discernment to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, who's the one
Which
teaching this for almost 1800 years? It was the church.
Oh, perfect segue into what I want to say.
There you go.
The 7 cardinal virtues. The Catholics call them the 7 cardinal virtues. They're also known as the 7 heavenly virtues. What are they? 4 cardinal. Well, okay, I'm reading from Wikipedia. 4 cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. And the 3 theological virtues are faith, hope, and charity. Okay, so let's go back to the first 4. Does a leader possess prudence? I guess that's being intelligent, right? Justice, a higher purpose. Temperance. Okay, he's controlling his emotions. He knows, how to lead people without biting their heads off. But, he has the ability to correct when it's necessary. That's temperance. And fortitude. Well, we've been talking about perseverance. That's fortitude.
Well, it
Mhm.
strikes me that you could write the story of Odysseus, and even if it never actually happened, we humans would still recognize the traits that he displays in that story to be that of a good leader. Now, we do know Alexander the Great did happen, but if it hadn't, we would still recognize what he did as the actions of a leader. We might disagree with conquering the whole known world and all that. That's not our point here. Our point here is that the dude was mentally capable of doing that.
And who taught Alexander the Great?
Aside from his father.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Philip too.
No, Aristotle.
Oh yeah,
Aristotle taught Alexander the Great.
that's right.
That's
They
pretty
were
cool.
around the same. They're around the same time. Here it is. Until the age of 16, Alexander was tutored by Aristotle. Huh.
That's pretty cool. I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, so
This guy
you're
was brilliant. He was raised by a brilliant guy. His nobility, he had all the military leadership raising by his family, and he was raised by an extremely intelligent man, Aristotle. We're still reading and using his crap today. Not his crap, but his.
yeah, I was gonna say crap, huh?
Yeah, no, it's a throwaway
Well,
word.
but what's interesting about that particular thing is look at the success that he achieved by following Aristotle's principles. He didn't achieve it by following the principles of the sophists that came before.
Oh.
Now, I'm not saying you can't achieve things with sophistry, but, and we're going to get a lot into this next week, I don't think that what you can achieve is constructive.
No, it's like it's a sophist is a tool used by idiots and tyrants.
Yeah.
Oh, sophists can achieve success,
Yes, they can.
but it seems like it's temporary
Mhm.
and it doesn't stand the test of time. So
Which
you
is
can manipulate people for a while and beguile them for a while, but it doesn't generate true devotion or respect or trust of your followers. And eventually they see through your sophistry and become disillusioned and leave.
which is why I wanted to talk about choice before bringing up this particular topic.
Oh, so do you have a little strategy there, Plutarch, in recommending topics to me?
Yes, I did recommend this one to you.
That's okay.
But yes, there is, as we have said before, there is somewhere where we're going with all of this. There is a design and direction we want to go, and we have to talk about leaders, in part because we're getting a whole bunch of new leaders, whether we want to or not, over the next 3 months. And we chose them. We actually chose them. So we bear the responsibility. In the military, you don't choose your leader. But here we do. Oh, okay.
That's right.
Oh, this is an interesting comment that I want to pull up on sophistry from Shu here.
Sure.
Destiny achieved fame through sophistry, but also yes, he did. Well, sophistry at the end of the day is a might makes right philosophy. As long as I can bludgeon you into believing what I believe, then I win. So,
Ah, so
but
it
that
presumes amorality to accomplish its utilitarian ends, but it still has a morality, even though it pretends it doesn't.
correct. Which is also why I wanted to talk about the morality of choice on Monday.
No,
But
fun.
but yes, that you can achieve many things through sophistry. The sophists in ancient Greek were really quite popular for the time that they were around. I mean, Nick, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think my read of history is that far off there.
No, and they had the same problem in also in Rome later on with we call them like the rhetoricians. So
Yes.
the overuse of rhetoric. The Roman version of the Greek sophist.
And it is something, what I find interesting about that is it's something we see pop up in societies cyclically, and sophistry, rhetoricism, all seems to point towards not a collapse of the society, but a move towards authoritarianism. Because the very logic that these guys are using is not logic. It's as long as I can convince you I'm right, then I win. It's might makes right.
Might makes right. Yeah.
Right. And because of that, the way that your brain is trained to think is very different than somebody like Aristotle, who's trained to think through things logically and dispassionately. He might come to a realization that he doesn't like, but he allows himself to get there.
Okay.
Rant over.
So
no, it's important.
Going back to red pill theories or stuff, is dominance enough to be a good leader? Now, I'm not saying dominance is not important and a good thing, but is dominance enough to be a leader?
No. Although I don't think anyone would argue that Alexander the Great did not have dominance. I think if you argue that, you're an idiot. But he had way more than that.
He had frame. He had intelligence. I mean, you could be a leader of a family, perhaps, with some frame and a dominant masculine presence, a frame, sure. But you're not going to be a leader of many men.
Oh, so there's a difference between leading family and leading men.
Yes. And one does tend to lead to another, sure. We can get into that later.
So, the things that the red pill talks about, promoting traits and encouraging men to become more dominant and have frame and all that, those are good things and necessary,
Yes.
but not solely sufficient to be a leader.
Well,
Again,
if
I'll
they
read
were,
that quote.
every red pill
Fundamentals
guy
of
would be a
leadership.
leader.
Fundamentals of leadership: courage, intelligence, perseverance, and responsibility.
Oh, that last one's going to cause some issues.
Of course it will.
In the red pill.
Of course it will. And they can straight up, pound sand. So.
Well, much more than likely.
Oh, you can make me take responsibility for saying that, but you can't take responsibility for your actions? Oh, okay.
Well, what will end up happening to those guys is what always happens to those guys throughout history. They're a flash in the pan. They get some fame, and then they implode because. Remember what I was going back to what I was saying earlier. Even if the story of Alexander the Great wasn't true, if it was just a story, you'd still recognize those principles of leadership in the story.
Yes.
What happens is when the fake leaders stand up thinking that all they need is to be gym bros, eventually somebody else who's smart and actually has all the traits of leader comes up and says, wait a minute, you ain't it. And as enough of those people do, you're found out and exposed.
Right.
So,
they're metal. It's untested metal. So you have they have all the appearance of a well-forged blade until they use it.
Yeah.
So, you talk about responsibility. So responsibility is being accountable, right?
Yes, sir.
And if you're responsible and accountable, you have to admit when you're wrong. So that involves humility.
Yeah.
So responsibility, if it's necessary for leadership, can we recognize people that lack accountability and humility?
Oh, wasn't there something that was going on in the manosphere earlier this week on exactly this topic, Steve?
Well, I think so. I think,
All right.
Did it come from the whatever podcast?
I think that's where you're going with this.
I'm not going anywhere in particular, but that's a good example. And someone who, we might as well just say, Andrew Wilson, on whatever, and had a debate with Nala.
Ugh.
And there's been an ongoing debate.
Kerfuffle.
Is she genuine? Kerfuffle, whatever. Is she, do we embrace her and say, oh, welcome to Christianity? Or do we say, well, let's wait and see? I don't know.
That's what I said a long time
demonstrate. So
ago.
Does she have the humility to admit she's wrong? And is she accountable for her past? Not really. He doesn't seem to be taking responsibility and now is out there trying to tell other people how to be Christian.
Including
doesn't even know the Trinity. Doesn't know basic Christology and theology, particularly of the Trinity.
Would that be a lack of intelligence?
Yes. Or ignorance.
Discipline. I mean, it could. Yeah, she hasn't studied it,
Hey,
but
she's a woman. She's
doesn't.
in the public light. She needs to shut the F up, go home, submit to her husband, and disappear.
Isn't that Nick? I was on. Well, I'll just say I was on with Glenn, and Elena and I said the same thing at the time. She needs to
That's
shut
correct.
up and be quiet and listen and learn.
Yep.
And maybe 5 years from now, she might have something of value to say on her prior experience with this stuff and how she's learned. Okay, maybe then, maybe, but for now, shut up and disappear. Uh, uh, Rachel Wilson actually, she did a great tweet on this. She said, "Look, Roosh V is, if you guys in the older red pill will recognize that name. When he converted to Christianity, what did he do? Folded up his website, took it all down, and left. And you haven't heard from him since.
Not quite true.
Well,
Ruth
but-
V took us along on his journey. He continued to post and host as a Christian. He took his books down. He disavowed everything his prior life, and he continued. And then he didn't. Then he went away.
Yeah.
But it wasn't out of humility. I just think God called him and said, "Okay, you're done with your public persona. Now go do your thing. Follow me." No, it's not about claim and fame.
Well,
And, it was a transition, but he was not, even in this transition, he was not telling people how to be Christian. He was just saying, this is what I'm doing.
And I want for the audience, I want to point out here that Nala's transition is less than a year old, and she's out here trying to tell Andrew Wilson, who is basically a scholar on Orthodox Christianity at this point. He might disagree with that, but he can argue Christianity really well, and she's going after him.
Andrew would say he's a fairly new Orthodox Christian. But Andrew grew up Christian. He was seeking Christian knowledge and trying to practice, the Protestant side. And so he'd never turned his back on it, wasn't acting against it. Then he became Orthodox, and he spent 3 years as a catechumen. I don't know what they got, something like that. And then he finally was accepted into the Orthodox Church. No, it wasn't overnight. And he strives to say he's not an Orthodox. He's not an expert on Orthodoxy. He's not out there doing apologetics, which means proving to others Christian stuff. He's a political commentator, but he does comment on Christian things from a political perspective, and he has a certain amount of knowledge. He only goes so far as to what he's telling others. He doesn't hold himself out there as an expert on everything. He defers to others. So, okay, I respect the guy for that, because he goes as far as he feels comfortable or called, or as far as he has the authority to go, because he has sought the blessing or the permission of his priest. Okay, you can do this, and he's not asking to go further and holding himself out there as preaching on what true Christianity is. And I think he does a pretty good job of representing that.
I agree. Now, on the other side of the table, because this is whatever, we have Nala, who converted to Christianity over New Year's week last year. So that week in between Christmas and New Year's is when she converted. It's all on her Instagram. Glenn and I did a whole mapping of the timeline. And here she is 10 months later, yelling with a Christian who has been a Christian for decades, who has, sought to actually submit himself to learn Christianity, who has also made a life debating, yes, politics, but has learned how to think, is what I'm really trying to get at there. And she decides that she can call him out because she spent 10 months at a hyper evangelical church.
No,
It's
that's
sad,
not
right?
the reason.
What's really, how old is she?
22 or 3, I can't remember.
So I'll tell you this. Before, my kids were allowed by the church to be, kidnapped essentially through the court system and everything. And I lost custody of my kids. And I trained my kids. The very things that she got wrong, my kids would know she was wrong in an instant. They knew the truth. They were catechized. They were instructed. They know these are basic Christian truths that even children should understand.
Yeah, that's how I was trained as a young. The Trinity
Just
starts
saying.
at 6.
Well, don't you guys understand that when she accepted Jesus, she became a new person in Christ? And the old was wiped away, and she was filled with the Holy Spirit. And don't you know, the Holy Spirit contains the wisdom of the universe, all wisdom.
Oh,
Therefore,
okay.
automatically, she knows the truth. She doesn't need to study anything and learn anything. And you, what?
Is she the new Anne Hutchinson?
No, all people in her church have all this instilled wisdom. They don't need to study anything. They just know. They know how to interpret the Bible because they're filled with the Holy Spirit. And
that's what Anne Hutchinson said.
No joke. Okay. That's well, I'm glad you understand. And now we can just defer to her Holy Spirit inspired wisdom.
So the Holy Spirit filled her with the knowledge of the universe. I wish the Holy Spirit had done that for me. I would know so much more than I know now. Okay, I got to bring this comment up.
Is it exclusive to? Okay.
I had spiritual booty shorts on. Tacticus, you're not wrong. And that's really what this is. I brought this up because I want to make a point. The reason we give so much deference to her is because everyone, when they saw pictures of her, started immediately thinking with their little heads. And that is the opposite of leadership. You do not get anywhere by thinking with your little head. You wind up simping for dumb broads on the internet.
Okay.
That's not leadership.
That's
not leadership.
That's kind of why a good leader is older. Because he's not dick thinking anymore. So a good leader is typically mid-40s. He's gained some years of wisdom, and he's not quite as much driven by his hormones and turned to follow some shapely body, although he's not immune to recognizing the beauty of that.
I just want to say that in the ideal situation, yes, Steve, you're right. Although, based on what back when we were working with Glenn on this in the comments sections, looking through it, there were far too many old men simping for my taste, which is it's disheartening, but it was not unexpected based on.
Okay, but not all old men are leaders.
Oh,
some
that's true.
You manage to put that. Okay, they understand that side of their nature, but they don't let that dominate them. Other people, probably the majority, still do. They let that dominate their thinking. Well, if you want to call it thinking.
Well, here's another kind of counterfactual. We brought up Napoleon before. What was his age when he died? Does anyone know?
I don't know.
He was 51 when he
Wow.
died. He had achieved his first reign. Okay. So he died in 1821. His first reign was 1804 to 1814. So his first reign as emperor occurred when he was 33.
Nice. Kind of like a young Alexander, huh?
Right. So again, we're not trying to say that all young men can go out there and be leaders of men, but it's a bit of a counterpoint. So Steve, yes, you're right. Leaders tend to be older because heuristically, older men tend to be wiser. But you got to be careful.
Right.
Even then, you got to be careful with who you choose as your leaders.
Oh, okay. So young men haven't developed the maturity to be good leaders. What does the Constitution say about the minimum age for a U.S. president?
45
They
years
added
old.
that in. They added that in, didn't they? Later.
No, it's
Was that original?
Yeah.
I didn't think it was original. I don't know why.
It was not in the Articles of Confederation. It was added.
Okay.
It was added to what we call the Constitution, and it was part of the fight that happened between the founding fathers as they were writing it.
So what is that age?
It's 45.
I thought it was 35. Pretty sure it's 30.
I thought it was 35 too.
It's
You guys might be
35.
right. Let me check. Yeah, you're right. It's 35.
Oh, so I can run.
So
Yeah, me too.
okay, that just means you have to achieve a certain age to be considered to be a good leader, and it's probably a generalization of one of those heuristic truths that if you're a great man, yep, you're going to demonstrate, you're going to have that capability at as young as 35. You might not have it at 35.
Well, I want to make a note here, just a historical note. Back when they were writing this in the 1700s, you reached the age of majority at like 14, and you were probably dead by 55. So 35 would have been well into middle age by then. So that 35, we might look at it and say, I don't know many 35s who I'd vote for president. And I'd go, yeah, you're probably right. But back then, a person who was 35 probably had grown kids.
Yep.
So, and
all right.
Anyway.
Well, I'm going to bring up more on leadership now since we're starting to press for time. It's 45 minutes in. We'll get into some historic examples of leadership. Since we're talking about founding fathers, Robert E. Lee's, I think it was his father was one of the leading, I think either a colonel or a general in the American Civil War, Light Horse Harry Lee. Robert E. Lee, of course, is known as probably the best American statesman out there, the best American general out there. And he was the chosen general for the Union, but he declined it. He declined the offer because Virginia was his country. So he became the leading general of the Confederacy.
Yeah, but how did he get it?
I read about it. It was originally, I think Davis eventually gave it to him right before the defense of Richmond and the Battle of 7 Days.
Well, but how did he? Okay, how did he earn it? I guess. What did he do to what characteristics did he demonstrate? Because we're talking about leaders here that Davis wanted to give it to.
It's kind of, we'll talk about that. Yeah, well, he had deference. he could communicate. He had no problem having deference to Davis and clear communications with Davis that other generals didn't have. And Davis, of course, was the president of the Confederacy.
Now, I'm the yank of the group. It's interesting that you talk about deference because the successful the North had a lot of really bad generals. I don't think anyone.
That's some good ones too.
Yeah, I don't think anyone disagrees that they had some really bad generals, and most of those generals were we would call them political appointees from before the war now.
Yeah.
But in a war, your political friends no longer matter. It comes down to deference to, I mean, I'm reading the bottom of your notes here, deference to the leader, to the, a good leader is first a good subordinate, but also competence. The North had a huge competency problem.
Yes.
So a leader must have basic competence.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Am I jumping ahead?
Competence, you pretty much, but if you don't have competence, you basically have nothing. You can't even do your job as a leader. You can't do the basic things.
Can I compensate for my lack of competence with hubris?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like middle management?
Well, I might not be competent, but as long as I believe that my shit doesn't stink, I might make a good leader, right?
You might make I'm not going to call it a good leader. You might make a chosen leader because people, when times are easy, people don't know what they need to pay attention to. So they tend to pay attention to external signs. And as long as you project the external confidence, I mean, that's where the term con men comes from. They're confidence men. And that's really what.
I mean, yes, men, mean the bureaucrat men.
Yes.
Like in the churches and stuff. The useless bureaucrats. Okay.
There's a lot of similarity between the bureaucratic and the con men. They both use the same tools and tactics to achieve their goals.
Oh, and we know that there have been a lot of religious con men.
Oh
yeah, we'll talk
wrap
about that.
themselves in religion and lead a whole bunch of people to bad ends. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Mark Driscoll, we're just a
Tim
name.
Keller.
Ooh,
how about Jim Jones?
Yeah, that's a name. Can I say this without getting canceled? Do you think we'll get on a channel for saying Joseph Smith?
Well, he was a con man. So is Osteen.
Joel Osteen.
Oh no! Oh, I'm devastated now.
But Nick, Joel has more than one private jet. Shouldn't we listen to him? Look how successful he's been.
He's just another sophist.
Hey, Jerry Falwell had a private jet too, didn't he?
Was he the guy who did that big overacted tearful demonstration when he was found out for
No.
Yep. Or is that somebody else?
No, that's him. That's him. Just Jerry Falwell. No, is it?
We talked about this in our corn episode.
No, it wasn't Falwell. It was.
You sure?
Pretty sure. The I have sinned. No, that wasn't Falwell.
You should.
I am drawing a blank.
He was in Louisiana, wasn't he? Jimmy Swaggart.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Jimmy Swaggart. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Jimmy Jerry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close in my head.
Oh, it's good Southern names.
Well, talking about Southerners, let's get back to Lee. Lee, as a Southerner, a good Virginia, who I'm also related to, Lee was focused on winning the war. So this is a book about leadership. So I recommend getting it. It's by Robert Lee on Leadership: Lessons in Character, Courage, and Vision by H.W. Crocker. Very good book. I recommend buying it. Lee was focused on winning the war, not on advancing his career or jealously guarding his prerogatives. As he had in Mexico, Lee won respectability through competence. He won field command through that neglected Christian virtue, humility. And here he illustrated another of his paradoxical lessons of leadership. An effective leader needs to be humble. Why? Because a leader needs to subordinate himself to his cause, both so that he can envision its goals and its needs clearly, without the gauzy film of ego or self-interest coming in between, and so as to set an example of devotion to duty, a good not only in itself, but to keep one's subordinates focused on the very same goal.
Oh, do I have lots to say about this? Oh, so
Steve had a good comment before this started too.
yeah. Well, but we were talking about what, the red pill and leadership. What I find fascinating is that many of the purported leaders of the red pill demonstrate exactly none of this. They are flashy, they're all about making sure that you know that they have achieved some sort of status and success. And that's why you need to follow them. But what's interesting is, and we are going to get deep into this next week, men might follow you for a while, but they will not follow you through the fire. And there is always a fire.
Yes. Well,
Because,
men are
Okay,
forged in fire.
I'm gonna say my
Through the
piece
fire.
here.
All right.
Here's how we absolutely agree and amplify and destroy the perception that modern Christians have of servant leadership.
mm.
Oh, absolutely. Jesus was a servant leader. He was a servant to his purpose. And he was a leader of his subordinates.
Mm.
He was not a servant to his subordinates. So, servant leadership, hell yes, I'm all in favor of that. I serve my purpose and I am a leader of those under my authority and protection.
So what you're saying is right now, nobody's getting this right.
I think you're right. Yes, no one understands this. So rather than say, you got it wrong, just say, you got it right, but you don't really know what it means. And it's kind of an agree and amplify, and then tell them what it means and say, yes, I'm all in favor.
That's an
To the
interesting tack.
cause.
Yeah, that's
To
an
the
interesting tack.
cause.
Because
Mhm.
with servant leadership, because the reason agree and amplify works so well is because you basically adopt your opponent's position and start adding on to it. And then you add so much onto it that they find out that you add so much truth onto it, and their view crumbles and is replaced with yours. I love it as a
Yeah.
tactic. Go ahead, Nick.
And that's particularly the problem of complementarianism is they replace man's mission with being not wholly solely being his wife, right? But having a mission prior to getting married, right? And she comes
Right.
along in that mission. They replace his mission with his wife. She is his mission. No. And so,
Well,
but you got to be a servant to the cause.
Nick.
Complementarian is trash.
What the
It
complementarians are
destroys
saying,
men.
what the complementarians are really saying is that Jesus worships the church,
Yep.
which is actual
All
heresy.
responsibility, no authority is what? As Rollo Tomasi said.
Chaos.
He's correct. Yeah.
Chaos too, yes. Rollo says slavery, but yes, it's chaos.
Slavery.
Oh, I just got a new analogy. And we say, the phrase flying up your own asshole. Another way of looking at is being subordinate to your subordinate.
Which makes no logical sense.
No logical sense. And how can a person fly
Right.
up their own asshole? That makes no logical sense either.
Mhm.
So
But
yeah,
notice
so
here, there's no ego or self-interest, but your interest is in the mission. Therefore, you care for those under you. But you're not their subordinate. They're the subordinates, but you lead your subordinates in a proper manner.
and you can't lead your subordinate by subordinating yourself to them. Like how did we lose track of logic this badly that we went down these roads? It's a rhetorical question. You guys don't have to answer. I'm just
We react.
yeah.
We react and we don't think about this. Okay, how do the three of us come up with solutions? We talk about these things. And then we build on each other's ideas and I got a new idea because what do these other guys say? And okay, we achieve a lot. The other thing that you can observe is we rarely get things wrong because there's three of us
Checking each other.
And if one guy starts going off
Yep.
in the weeds, no, the other guys won't stand for it. So one guy by himself, it doesn't work. Now, okay, Lee, back to Lee. In this description that you mentioned, did he have good people, good men around him, and did he listen to those men?
Yes. He did.
Maybe
Stonewall
that's
Jackson, which we'll
essential.
get to. You also had, I think, Longstreet, and there's others that he had from time to time. But yeah,
Well, I'm sure he had unnamed people that
Zeb
are
Stewart.
lost to
Yeah, Zeb
history
Stewart.
underneath him that we will never know their names. But I also believe that Lee was smart enough that he surrounded himself with other men of good quality, of good counsel. Whether they be colonels or majors or whatever. I mean, he probably was a good judge of character, and he assembled a team of men with good leadership characteristics.
Well, here's
Yes.
the thing. The only way you can do that is, as is said here, without the gauzy film of ego or self-interest. No man who is self-interested or has a big ego could ever put somebody who is as capable or more of them in their orbit. You can't, if you have that kind of ego and self-interest, you cannot let anybody in who might possibly challenge you or might be better than you. But in a proper functioning leadership role, you're going to look and say, I want the best. And you're going to, and you're going to, and particularly in the military case, okay, let's say he's a major. Let's say he's not even a colonel. Okay, now I doubt Lee actually dealt with the majors that much, but he wanted to have the best majors he could have. And then if something happens and he needs to get rid of a colonel, he can look through his majors and say, you get promoted. but you cannot do that with self-interest. You cannot lead men with self-interest. And we're going to get into self-interest a lot next week because it comes up a lot in modern society. But if you want to know why your leadership sucks, you're reading it right on screen right now.
Right.
Well,
And what's
let
his
me
first
put it this
lesson? A
way.
good leader is first a good subordinate, right?
Yes.
So somebody
To his
prove
mission.
themselves. Yes. Well,
So,
mission first.
You're not always at the top of the hierarchy. You're somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And so you're subordinate to those who are your superiors, even in the military, like a major's subordinate to the colonels and the generals.
right.
Everybody has a superior.
To paraphrase what Plutarch is saying in a few words, a good leader doesn't surround himself with yes men, who are also known as brown nosers.
Brown falcons. The military guys know who I'm talking about.
Gosh. Paper pushers. Middle management.
Well, yeah, there's so much right there in this idea that you cannot have, you must set aside your ego and self-interest that I think gets overlooked. It cannot be overstated.
Yes. But also, leader, he says, must be decisive. His decisions, a fulfillment of his duty, vision, and experience. Says Lee was a thorough man of business, quick to decision, yet methodical in all he did. He knew what he wanted. He knew what an army should be.
Yeah, I've never met a successful leader who could not make a decision. Sometimes they had to think about it, because sometimes you do. But the middle managers are where you find the indecisive people.
It's like, got to figure out which way the wind is blowing before I decide on this.
Which way is the most politically beneficial for me?
Oh, what was that general? McClellan. Yeah. He's really good at building up and training his troops.
Well,
he never could put his troops to battle.
Well, and look, sometimes we need to look at the strengths of a man and say, you know what, you're really good at training troops. That just needs to be what you do. We're pulling you off the front, but I don't want to. Yeah, too bad.
It's not my fault. McClellan.
Yeah, it actually is.
Lacking accountability.
Lacking accountability.
Oh, so a leader is also a good leader is humble. He guards against ego distorting his vision. A leader has to achieve his armies or his businesses or his team's goals, not his private ones. A leader's role is one of service.
And this is what the servant leader folks twist.
To his purpose, yeah.
And this I think is where the servant leader guys get their stuff twisted up. They think, oh, well, because the role of a leader is service, and then being a servant leader, that must mean what it is. It's not service to person, it's service to mission.
Yes.
Right. Your service is to something above, not below.
Yes. And so
to a greater purpose, a greater mission, a greater cause, not a subordinate, which means you're always looking down and putting yourself below those underneath you instead of to the greater good.
Right. But actually, he gets his subordinates to go after his common goal. A leader focuses subordinates on their common goal and inspires them by his own devotion to achieving it. Not service to his subordinates, but devotion to the goal.
Which is an interesting...
Not that he doesn't have respect to his subordinates in a certain fashion, but they are not his goal.
Right. Well, and more to the point here, I think he is not his own goal. This is where the ego and self-interest really hits, because you cannot... I'm a leader. If my job is to focus my subordinates and I'm an egotist and self-interested, I'm going to focus my subordinates on me. But that doesn't advance the common goal. And it certainly doesn't inspire devotion to achieving it. The only thing you can say is, in this example, I am the common goal. Well, that is inherently destructive, because if the common goal is not constructive for the world, then what happens when you die? This is battle. Generals got shot, right?
They do die.
What happens is the army just disappears and falls apart as if no better than smoke.
So earlier tonight, Nick commented that the Catholic Church seems to have lost its way at Vatican II. Because Nick grew up as a Catholic.
Well, I would say it lost
Okay.
its way beforehand, but at least they're more respectable, I think, prior to Vatican II.
Okay. What was the primary? Okay, the liturgy changed. But how did the priest change? The leader. Prior to Vatican II, the priests celebrated Mass ad orientem, which means he faced the altar. His back was to the people. So he raised the host above his head. He was focused on God. Everyone saw the back of the priest and they focused on God. Everyone is oriented in the same direction. After Vatican II, they changed it. They wanted to enforce the body of Christ. So now the priest faces the people. That's called vox populi, against the people in Latin. And he raises it. And now who are the people focused on? The face of the priest holding it up. When his back was, everybody was facing the same direction. He was focusing on God, and everyone focused that direction. That's a leader. But
you said vox
so
populi
a leader
being against the people. It means the voice of the people.
Vox's voice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, whatever it is, it's against.
Really, so you're saying in effect it's contra populi, right?
Yeah, I don't know what they call it in Latin, but the point is it changed. So does a leader have the attention focused on him, or does he inspire his followers to focus their attention through him onto his mission? And I think that's the definition of a leader. And we can see this in our Christian faith. There are a lot of television, modern church leaders who want to focus on themselves, not the focus on Christ. And this is just a metaphor. I'm just throwing out ideas so you can observe whether your pastor is really a true leader. Does he want the focus on himself, or does he have the humility to diminish himself and focus your attention on God or on Jesus?
Okay. I want to add something here, because it's kind of a clarification. We see guys like Driscoll in particular. I've done a lot of watching of his stuff, and he always thumps his chest loudly about how you should focus on God and focus on this and focus, you shouldn't be focusing on him. In fact, he says you shouldn't be focusing on me. You shouldn't be. Why then do people always seem to focus on him so much? And I think, having watched him, he knows full well that in order to get people to focus on him, he has to make the correct supplications to the higher power that he is stealing for himself. If that makes sense. And we see this a lot in con men, is that they are often the loudest in proclaiming their faith, whatever. We see it in religious convent all the time. They're the loudest for God.
Is this a humble brag?
Yeah. That was the word I'm looking for. But it and I'm bringing that up because I want people to realize that we're talking about all this stuff, but be aware that people like Osteen and Driscoll use these tactics knowing that you are looking for somebody who's looking towards God, not them. And so they have to get out in front and be the loudest one yelling for God. And so that way you'll follow them.
I am a man of great humility.
If you have to say it, you aren't.
Right.
Here's another one. Or they claim they need to be the focus. Oh, I've seen this one. They claim they need to be the focus so that they can focus on God. I'm slightly editing it, but I think that's what you meant, Tacticus. The wife to be the papal segue to God. Servant leadership mission creep. Ooh, I love that. But yeah, it's you need to focus on me so that we can focus on God together. Sure.
And if you send me a lot of money, then I can better focus on God.
Well, that way, hey, if you send me all this money, I will have so much free time to focus on God while I flit around in my Hawker 800 or whatever it is that Holstein has.
Only $9.95. Infomercial time.
I know we're making a lot of jokes, and that's kind of stretching this one out tonight, but this is fun.
It is. You laugh your enemies to scorn. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm going to mention this one here, and Plutarch, you mentioned something earlier. We talked about probably 20 minutes ago. Hopefully, you can make that connection. A leader orders hard work. So this is lessons again from Robert E. Lee in his book on leadership. He didn't write the book on leadership, but somebody wrote a book on leadership based on Robert E. Lee. So a leader orders hard work and enforces necessary discipline, but doesn't suffocate his subordinates' initiative or spirit. His goal is assembling a voluntary association of gentlemen organized for the sole business of his enterprise.
So when I was talking about majors and making sure that, even down the ranks, you have competent people who can step up.
You're not threatened by them.
Yes.
You're not threatened by intelligent people.
If you're threatened by somebody,
squash them.
If you're threatened by somebody who is more intelligent than you are, you're not a leader.
No.
You cannot lead if you're threatened by somebody who's more intelligent than you. And I'm going to say this, it talks about organized for the sole business of his enterprise. If you are the most intelligent person in the room, your enterprise can achieve no more than you personally can achieve. Intelligence is not an aggregate. And this is a mistake that a lot of people make with IQ. They think, oh, if we put 100 IQ people in the room, the works of Shakespeare will fall out. No. And they actually did a mathematical study on the whole. If a million monkeys bang on typewriters for a million years, eventually the works of Shakespeare will fall out. Computers have been able to prove that that's not true. There's no amount of time that could happen. And that's kind of the point here. If you don't surround yourself by people who are at least as smart, if not smarter than you, you become the focus because you are the only person who has the intelligence in your group to lead.
So, okay, I'm going to open a can of worms for Plutarch here.
Uh-oh. What did I do?
Can a midwit be a good leader?
Okay. First, I want I do need to define midwit here because this is a conversation that we had offline, and I defined it offline. And there is an actual definition. A midwit is not a 100 IQ average. A midwit is somebody with an IQ between 105 to 120. So a midwit, okay, a midwit can lead. They can, but because we have seen this, they because they do have higher intelligence than average. Somebody with an IQ of 115 is the top 10% of the population. Okay, so they are in a higher bucket of intelligence. However, one of the things that we have noticed is that, and this is another thing we were talking about offline, is that many people do not experience this. But if you have ever experienced, you go home after having a conversation, you go, aha, I should have said that. That human function starts at about an IQ of 125. So great leaders who have the ability to recognize that somebody else made a good point and that they need to change how they respond and whatnot. There's a famous video of Elon Musk talking to another rocket engineer, and the rocket engineer goes, well, but have you ever thought about just using, they're talking hot gas versus cold gas thrusters. Well, I just thought about using hot gas off, and because they had it for a different, they had that for a different system. And you could just watch Ellen go, you're right, we should do that. He invites the engineer back a year later and shows off the changes that they made because of what this guy said. This guy is not smarter than Elon. He's not, but he had an insight, and Elon had the intelligence to recognize that insight and go, that's what we need to do.
See, that's the trait that makes a good leader.
Yes.
Listening to those underneath him.
Yes.
So to paraphrase, this is the way my mind understands this. A midwit, way above average, probably in the 90th percentile of intelligence. And she knows they're a lot smarter or quicker to process things than other people.
He knows that they are.
But
he knows that he is what you're saying. Like,
yes.
Okay.
But when you move up higher in intelligence, like to the 95th, 98th percentile, they know everything that other guy knows. But now they realize that there is more that they don't know than what they know. Whereas the guy a little bit lower doesn't quite realize that yet. And so the guy who's a little bit lower in intelligence, and, believe in IQ or not, but we're still talking about a relative scale here. He kind of thinks he's as smarter than everybody else or as smart as everybody else. So he tends to not want to surround himself with people smarter than him because that kind of threatens him.
Correct.
Whereas you move up in intelligence to the upper, the upper 2%, whatever, they say, oh yeah, I'll absolutely, I'll have a smarter guy underneath me because you know what? There's a lot I don't know, and he might be able to correct me, but you know what? I'm still in charge. And you know what? If he has the capability and he wants to be in charge, it's not my ego, and so it doesn't bother me. Theoretically.
So Nick, I
want to. That makes a good subordinate. That makes you need to make him like chief of something real quick.
Well, Nick, I want to bring something up because tactic is this is a comment. Interesting point. That is a natural order of specialization.
Okay.
Specialization is built into the natural order, and it's okay. It's okay to have somebody under you working for you who knows more than you do. It's okay.
That's great.
Elon would not be able to do what he does if he had ego about being the smartest guy in the room. He has people working for him who are smarter, but who are also more specialized. Elon does not know the ins and outs of rocket engine design. He doesn't, and he will tell you that. He went out and found the best people he could, paid them buckets of money to come work for him, and sent them on there. And then what does he do? He says, go build me the best rocket engine you can. And no, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And that gets to Tacticus' second comment here. Utility and specialization are maximized by wisdom that delegates it most efficiently. This is Robert Lee doing the same thing, finding the people who can most efficiently help him achieve his goals, and then saying, this is the direction we're going. I'm going to let you go, because there's a little bit of trust here. You have to trust your people, but it's a lot easier to trust people who agree with your mission, and that you're all focused together on the mission, and they want to pull with you, and they're smart enough to realize why it's important. So
There's also humility involved here.
oh yeah.
I'm a leader,
Hmm.
and I hire or surround myself with people as smart or even smarter than me who are specialized.
Mhm. Yep.
I'm doing something just stupid. They're going to say, that's really stupid. Don't do that. Here's the reason. As long as my ego's not involved, I can listen to them. They can save me from being a dumb shit. Because intelligence is no protection against stupidity.
No, it's not. Intelligence, all it really means is that you get to the answer faster, which is why in Monday's episode, my wife brought up a question. It was like, does that mean that people who are less intelligent use more heuristics? No, it's the opposite. People who are more intelligent use more heuristics. That's how they get to the answer faster than average intelligence. They can cut more steps out of the thought process. This doesn't mean that Elon knows everything about how to design rocket engines. In fact, his rocket engineer might not even have as high an IQ as Elon does, but he has a lot more experience and depth of understanding in his particular field. And so when we're talking about ego, this is critical, because Elon could just say that, well, I have an IQ of 170.
Mhm.
I'm smarter than you. No, you're not. You don't have the knowledge to go with that intelligence.
Right. So intelligence should lead you to understanding, not egoism. That gets to the next point. A leader needs to understand the nature of his cause.
Mhm.
Old rules might not apply. If the odds are against your success, you cannot play the odds and expect to win.
Yeah.
Oh. So again, humility on display. You can't just double down, say, well, this has always worked before and I'm the greatest, so I'm always going to win. I'm like, no, the numbers matter.
I'll tell you what, learning how to trade was the most humiliating experience of my life. It really was.
That's why few people can successfully do it. And you know what? I tried. I couldn't successfully do it. And I'm a pretty smart guy. No, couldn't do it.
And I'm not going to say that I'm like super successful or anything. I mean, you don't see me driving Lambos.
I wouldn't drive one if I had the money.
Well, that's probably wise advice for other reasons, but like, and when you talk to the guys who actually succeed, they're not the ones out there driving Lambos.
I know.
But it's I mean,
some of them are just happy with that roof over the head, electricity, running water, and a fridge full of beer.
And a little bit of freedom.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of freedom in that life. So you have to want it, but it's there. The reason I brought up trading is because of the odds thing. And it's the odds thing is what kills so many traders. They say, oh, well, but this has happened for so long, or my personal favorite, but that's never happened. Go ahead.
My experience in trying to trade, if I would have done made every decision exactly the opposite of what I did, I would have made boatloads of money.
That's true of most people. What the successful traders will tell you is that they actually wish that they had done the same thing, but they understood the odds. You have to understand what the odds are, but they were able to catch what we call regime change. Something changed in the market, and now something else is in control. There's more than just playing the odds, and this is what they're saying by the old rules might not apply. Things change.
Right.
And if
Room
you
for changes, and you can be outgunned, outmanned, undersupplied, and only for so long, and which is why he surrendered ultimately to unconditional surrender grant at Appomattox.
we know that's a hard one for you to say without getting a little teared up.
It is what it is. I mean,
well, there is a large aspect of war, even to this very day, that is just logistics. But what those logistics need to look like is constantly changing. So, again, the old rules don't apply. In fact, it's almost better if you assume that the old rules don't apply. It'll at least open your mind a little bit to seeing things that you hadn't considered before. But
okay. But you talked about generalizations and heuristics.
Yep.
So first of all, you start with a generalization.
Yep.
And you assume it's true. Then you look for exceptions and why it doesn't apply. Then you say, well, this time it doesn't apply. But you still go through the generalization first. And then you test things against that. Rather than saying, oh, I don't even start with a generalization. I have to invent everything from
that doesn't work either.
Ground zero.
So in trading, we do the same thing. We start with some general rules about how the market typically behaves. And then you might look at it and say, because everyone was all big on CPI, like, for example, CPI would cause these big trading ranges that you could easily make money off of. And then in 2023, it stopped mattering. Okay. So the generalization is that inflation matters for, I won't get into it, lots of reasons, but now it doesn't. Okay. And so you look at it and you go, well, this was the rule, but now it's shifted around. And, or you can say, or we have something called technical analysis. And that's, you draw shapes on the chart and it says, okay, well, this is, call it a bull flag, which just means it'll keep going up. I can't tell you how many times I've also seen it not go up. And there was in those cases, I was able to find a specific reason for it, but I had to go, I drew the flag and I said, oh, okay, my base case is that this will continue. I'm looking at the dollar chart right now that has exactly this on it. Okay. And it worked. Okay, great. So you start with the generalizations because anybody with any intelligence has to, in order to be able to think faster than the other guy. And once you've worked through the generalizations, you go, okay, what do I need? What am I missing? That I think is probably the more important question. The generalizations have gotten me a general view. What am I missing on this particular problem?
Okay. Let's talk about trading. The bull flag. There is a point where it's negated.
Yes, there is.
So let's assume that there are programs out there doing program trading that take the bull flag and actually understand it's a bull flag, and then they dip it down so it negates the bull flag. But really, it doesn't. It just wipes out the people who are looking for that trigger point. And then the bull flag works and it does what it did. But everybody who was just following the strict rules of the bull flag.
Correct. Yes. I've seen this happen.
Does that kind of thing happen? Therefore, you take the generalization. Oh, bull flag, true. It's going down. It's going. The energy is out, and if it violates this point, okay, it's a failed bull flag, and so it's not going up. But they purposely fail it, and it's going to succeed.
You know what this requires?
This
Steve?
is just an example.
Well, you know how you combat this, Steve? And I don't know if we've gotten too much into this yet.
No.
Patience.
Yeah.
My best trades are not
emotions
for the
go
bottom.
up
Oh,
when I
oh,
need
yeah.
a patience and it's going against me. Oh, it hurts. I got to get out. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, what we're talking about, these are the things that go through your mind. We are all driven by emotions, even the leaders. And
Nick, did
they
Robert
have enough
E. Lee have
intelligence
emotions?
to hold on.
Yes, he did.
Well, so there's intelligence, but there's also patience. And I mean, we talked about temperance, and that patience is a form of temperance, I believe. My best trades.
So you don't need to be
not,
led by emotions.
Yeah, no, we should not be led by emotions. And my best trades have come when my emotions were telling me that everything was going to crap. I made a great trade on October 7th. It was my biggest trade ever. And everything was telling me that this thing should just fall off a cliff, that it was going to get a whole lot worse. I went in, bought some calls. Biggest trade I ever made. So, but I had the patience to wait. I didn't just immediately go in. I actually did it on like October 10th. I didn't immediately go in. Nope. You set aside the emotion, look at what you're actually seeing, look at what all the data you have, and then you wait. You wait to strike. You do not move, because if you move immediately, you're probably moving emotionally.
But you don't want to be forever patient and complete and reactive and put into inaction or react.
Decisive and methodical.
Yes.
And
yes.
This is where good generals really shine. They are patient. They let the enemy come to the prepared position that they have set up on the battlefield that gives them the optimal chance of success. And they wait till the opponent is in the optimal place for that strategy to work, and then they close the trap. They don't run out as soon as they see the first cannon cross the horizon.
Well, let's bring this back to something that Nick can.
Yeah, sorry about that, Nick.
Okay, so damn, my car doesn't work. I want a new car. I'm gonna search for a new car, and I'm gonna go check out cars. I'm gonna go visit the car dealership and talk to a salesman. Now he's gonna try and convince me. Should I buy the car that day? I'm thinking myself, he wants me to. Don't make that snap judgment. Say, no, I'm gathering information. I'm going to think about this 2, 5 a week, days, 2 or 5 days a week. And I'll come back and then do the deal. If you do the deal on the day your emotions are high, it's the bad decision. And that's having the self-discipline to do that. So what say you, Nick?
Most people don't have that discipline.
Which is how Nick made his money.
Oh yeah. Actually, I did have a lot of I had a lot of repeat business with some very intelligent customers, however. They came prepared. They didn't buy that day. But they kept coming back because I knew my crap. I was moderately aggressive, not to the point of annoying, but just so that they knew I wanted their business, and they were repeat customers, and we had a great relationship. So,
well, on the cars, so when I was going through my divorce, I got rear-ended. I was driving an old Accord. I loved that car, but I got rear-ended. This is like 10 days before my divorce is going to clear the courts. And it was a kid texting, folded up my car like an accordion. He actually took out 3 cars because I got pushed into the back of a car and he got pushed because we were all sitting at a light. Anyway, I was due to go to visit Elena, flying out literally 2 days later. I couldn't really do anything with it. That's a whole nother story for a different day. But I was driving a rental car that the insurance company provided. So I am now at a point where I actually do have to get a car. I have no car on my own. My ex has the other car that we had bought, right? So I've got a rental, and that's all I got, and I got to leave it at the airport, and it was a whole mess. But I'm a car guy, and so I had done a lot of research, and I knew what I wanted. And what I wanted was not very common in the country, even. And so I actually spent 3 weeks looking to see if what I wanted was available. It wasn't available. Okay, keep looking. Wasn't available.
Right.
Keep looking.
Special order?
No, I didn't have to special order because I wanted it used.
Huh.
I never
Okay.
buy new. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So the guys hate me for that. But so it pops up on a website. It's an hour drive away. I call them up and I say, "Is it still there?" Okay. Yes, it's still here. Can I come pick it up tomorrow? The price was right in the zone. It only had 12,000 miles on it, so it had done most of its depreciation, but not all. It hadn't been run through. I walk up, I show up, we take it for a test drive. I'm like, "Yep, this is the car I want. Let's go start paperwork. Do you want this option?" Nope. Walk down the list. Right. So this is a slightly different version of what you guys are talking about. I had done the research on what I'd wanted. I found it exactly what I wanted. The price was agreeable, and I just walked in and I said, "Here's what we're going to do." I didn't let the salesman get me all caught up in the emotion of buying a new car, because I had already set the conditions on the field, basically, on the field of battle. Here's what we're going to do.
There's
Here's what we're not
something
going to do.
else. Okay, you walked in with knowledge. You knew it was rare. You knew you were not going to negotiate the price down. Because if it's what I want, and if it's within an hour, I'm just going to have to pay the price. But it's what I want, and I've thought about it ahead of time, and I'm prepared to pay this. So you did your research. The other thing I want to mention is, we're talking about leadership here. But we can demonstrate the traits of leadership in ways that seem completely unrelated to leadership. Buying a car.
That's a good point.
Does that include qualities of leadership? Yeah. Decision.
Yes.
Doing your research.
Intelligence.
Being prudent. Intelligence.
Brain.
Okay. You know what you want. What's your mission? If that's my mission, to have that car, my mission is not to get that car for cheaper than anybody else. My mission is to get that car because that's what I want. So, okay, I'm going to have to pay what they ask, and I know what's reasonable, so I'm just going to do it, and I'm prepared to do it, and that's being decisive when, striking when the iron is hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's Tacticus is saying, analysis paralysis is as bad as rash, emotional, reactive analysis. Right. Analysis paralysis is actually just another form of emotional thinking. You just can't decide because you're emoting about what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I can't figure it out.
Okay, if you can't figure it out, here's how I go about it. Okay, let's assume I do this and it's a bad decision. What's it going to cost me? How do I get out of this or mitigate the consequences if I'm making a bad decision? And I say, oh, it's going to cost me that much? Okay, I can deal with that. I can handle that.
Yep.
If I'm wrong, Okay, this is what it's going to cost me. Therefore, I'm not risking. Okay, bought a car for $30,000. Oh, if I'm wrong, it's a wrong car and I have to sell it. I can sell it for 27 grand, but it's a car I really want. Yeah,
Yep.
can I stomach that 3 grand loss? Yeah, I'm willing to take the risk. So you're not risking 30,000, you're risking 3,000 and a bunch of inconvenience. So that's another way to look at things. What's the downside?
Well, and if you're leading people, particularly in this context of army, getting back to Lee, look, we have to accept in any military campaign that there's going to be risk, sometimes massive risk, leaving your flanks exposed to achieve to take a certain objective. It's a risk, but it could end up being worth it. Right. And it is the job of the leader to weigh those risks and the rewards as methodically as possible and then decide. And it is the job of the subordinates to look at their piece of that plan and weigh the risks of one or the other ways of doing it and decide, and so on and so forth down the line. That is what leadership looks like.
But if you're always plagued by indecision or being reactive, like being defensive, right?
Mhm.
I'll get to this, but rope it back in. So,
Hey, Nick,
what?
this is such a good stream on leadership and so important. I know you have so much more information left.
We're not going to
that
get
I
to the
think-
Bible part. Well, I'll mention a few. We'll do another day.
No. I think we should carry it through Lee and then have a leadership part 2.
Well, we'll go through
Because,
Stonewall.
you know
then
what?
we'll have leadership part 2.
Okay.
Okay, whatever. But I think leadership is such an important part
Yep.
of masculinity and patriarchy
Yes.
that
Yes.
we should just keep talking about it, even if we go over the same thing again. I mean, that's it.
Yeah. Well,
Because
yeah, we'll go
every
through
man
Stonewall,
wants to
then
know
we'll
about
be done.
leadership. Okay.
Yeah. That way, well, the next part I have is the Bible, and that's probably be equally as long. So it'd make a good cutoff
Okay.
point to end with Stonewall. So we'll do that. We'll get this. Thank you, Steve. Good suggestion.
Sure.
I was thinking much the same. We all kind of have the same wavelength.
Well, we didn't have a set plan for next Wednesday. I guess we do now, guys. Come back next
Yeah.
Wednesday for leadership part 2.
Okay. So we're talking about decision. So part of that is being aggressive. So what another trait of leadership is, while taking adequate precautions, right? A leader is aggressive in homing in on his opponent's weakness rather than fretting about his own. To
Mhm.
reiterate the cliche, the best defense is a good offense, or in Lee's words, Richmond is never so safe as when its defenders are absent. See, this was a huge problem. Like, I'm going to get to Stonewall. Stonewall recommended immediately invading the North at the start of the war, make it quick and decisive. He said, if we're always playing the defense, he thought they were going to lose, and they did, because they didn't seize the initiative. They were not aggressive enough at first, and later Lee and others saw the wisdom of Stonewall Jackson's plan. It's also frame control. If you're always reacting, you're playing into the enemy's hand.
Right. If so, defense is reactive, and the point that Stonewall's making here is key. When you're dealing with a war of logistics, you're dealing with, particularly because in the North had most of the industry. Even with the North having more industry, it was still going to take them time to switch from we call wartime or peacetime economy to wartime economy. If you just drive up there and smash their economy, you'll win. If you dither and you wait and you give your opponent time to switch their economy, then they will, and they will eventually roll you under just by sheer force of logistic might. They can literally just throw more lead at you. They can throw more bodies at you, right? At some point, the no amount of cunning can overcome gravity.
Yeah. So Blitzkrieg kind of came about following Stonewall's plan. It was successful, except if you couldn't win. And the Third Reich folded.
Well, they
Oh,
they could not compete
eventually.
long term logistically with
No.
the
Mm-mm.
United States. They couldn't compete
Right.
long term. But there were some very hard years for the United States, particularly early on. The war at the Atlantic and the amount of shipping we lost. It was not obvious that we were going to win until probably late 1944.
So you have to be aggressive. Also, leader can distinguish. Sorry, I'm not. You're right, Plutarch. I'm just moving forward.
No, go ahead.
A leader can distinguish between subordinates who make mistakes but have great potential, like Stonewall Jackson, and those who make mistakes and have no potential, and who should therefore be removed.
Wisdom and discernment with experience.
Yes. Hmm. If you don't make mistakes, you never learn. But some people make mistakes and never learn.
Yeah.
I think the comma there makes all the difference.
Those pesky
Yeah,
commas.
well, there's an easy way to determine the difference between the two. The guy who makes a mistake and says, I made a mistake, has humility. The guy who makes a mistake and won't admit he made a mistake lacks humility, and he's the guy that should be out of there.
Because humility is a
Trait of leadership.
So we were talking earlier about cars, and Steve, you said, oh, well, sometimes you can discern leadership traits in other people, even if they're not leading. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And that's what this point is talking about. He's saying Lee could understand that just because Stonewall made mistakes didn't mean that he was bad and didn't have potential. He was able to look at more than that and understand that there were the other leadership traits of, I have a bet here that Stonewall was pretty good at putting up his hand and saying, yep, I made a mistake.
Sometimes.
None of us are perfect.
Yeah, some stubbornness. We'll get into, but
the point being is that Lee saw in Jackson traits that he did not see in others, and they were leadership traits.
Oh, yeah.
And he probably saw them, despite the fact that Jackson was underneath him and commanding a smaller chunk of the army.
And that's where this is a good transition to Stonewall. This is what Lee taught. This is his observation of Lee, and with regards to Stonewall. And that's Thomas Jackson, right? But where others saw a strange, unclubbable, rough-hewn man, Lee saw a commander in the Shenandoah Valley who shared his aggressive, strategic vision, someone whose confidence in God's will was such as to inspire him to take great risks, someone who, and this was the fundamental point, understood the revolutionary nature of the struggle.
Oh, Stonewall was on mission.
Yes. He was aggressive, he was strategic, and he had confidence to take those risks for the struggle.
He probably also had a fallback plan in case things went bad.
And they did. And he was the man that came through time and time again. He got his name from the Battle of First Manassas. Let me find that. And there's some historical argument of the exact nature of how the sequence of these events, but he earned his nickname after a fellow general, Barnard E.B. exclaimed, so the Union was coming in. They'd crossed over from D.C. and it's Battle of First Manassas, and they're coming over in overwhelming numbers. And then all seemed to be falling apart. And it says, there's Barnard B. exclaimed, they had Jackson and his brigade. And he says, there is Jackson standing like a stone wall, rally behind the Virginians. He says the nickname came about while Jackson's brigade was holding off the Union Army on Henry Hill during the battle. So his brigade was critical to the Confederate victory.
So for people who are not familiar with Dixie speak, First Battle of Manassas is also called the First Battle of Bull Run, which is probably what it was called in your history books. And that occurred early in the war. This would be July 21st, 1861. If I recall correctly, the war was over in 64. So it had many years. The war, 64.
Didn't it end 65? That was a 65.
It might have been.
No, I could be wrong.
Well, but the war had many years to run after this.
Yeah. So this is what made Jackson so great. He was not the most intelligent man. He was essentially orphaned as a youth. He had a rough youth, but he was driven. He made it into West Point after somebody dropped out, and he studied and passed on the lower percentage, but he kept working his way up, and he became famous even in Mexico and the Mexican-American War as an artilleryman. And I think nobody would join the charge, so he and like one other guy would go, stood in front of the line and kept firing while all these bullets were spraying around him, something that he did till the day until he was taken out of commission, essentially. But this is where he got some of his brilliance from. Oh, he studied great men. He studied great leaders, like Napoleon. He says, as a this is Robert Louis Dabney, by the way. He was the chief of staff for General Stonewall Jackson, and probably the most brilliant theological mind in the North and South in the 19th century. I'm also related to Robert Louis Dabney as well. So he says on his biography of Stonewall Jackson, he says, as a strategist, the first Napoleon was undoubtedly his model. He had studied his campaigns diligently, and he was accustomed to remark with enthusiasm upon the evidences of his genius. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. We're just listening.
Yep.
Okay, because Tacticus says mute for something.
Yeah, Tacticus, we can hear him. Maybe on your end.
Okay. Few generals have waged war with such unvarying success as General Jackson. It has been truly remarked of him that he was never routed in battle, that he was never successfully surprised by his enemies, that he never had a train or any organized portion of his army captured by them, and that he never made entrenchments. Now, General Jackson's personal demeanor towards the soldiers was reserved but courteous. It was impossible for any to assume an improper familiarity towards him, and no one could be farther than he from all the arts of the demagogue. He never did anything for dramatic effect or for popularity, and never practiced any of those means for inspiring enthusiasm which Napoleon was such an adept. The only manifestation which he ever made of himself to his command was in the simple, single-minded performance of his duty. He was never known to show himself of set purpose to his troops, never made them speeches, and whenever they cheered him, escaped as quickly as possible.
Again, more traits of a leader.
Yeah. Devoted to the mission, devoted to duty, not egoism. Humility. And he studied other great minds.
Which you have to do.
He didn't want acclaim for himself. He did not want to be worshipped.
No. No, in fact, Lee congratulated him on a victory. He said, no. He said something respectful of Lee, but no, the true victory, the glory goes to God. He did not want to take personal victory for his own glory. He didn't want to take victory for his own glory. He wanted to say, no, it was the will of Almighty God.
You know, Steve.
So
you said something that you often hear this thrown around in the context of presidential elections, but everyone's asked, well, why do we have such shit leaders? Why? Well, because the people who lead the best are the most likely to not want to do it. And the people who choose to step into the leadership ring are the ones who really probably shouldn't be there. And I think this is kind of an example. It's not to say that guys like Stonewall will actively turn away from duty because they actually have high integrity and honor. They won't turn away from it, but they don't want it for themselves.
Right. Now, here's a little aside for you Protestants out there. You think worship is reserved for God? No. There are two types of worship: adoration and veneration. Adoration is reserved for God. Veneration is another type of worship. And yeah, you can worship a man with veneration, not with adoration. That's where we get the term the venerable blah blah blah. The venerable
being.
Mr. whatever. So veneration is a type of worship, and it can be to humans. And in England, and to further this point, in England, we don't call judges, they don't call judges your honor, they call them your worship. So,
Most
here's my point
to someone. Yeah.
Here's my point. Even good leaders do not want the type of worship of veneration. No, sorry. I don't seek that. So, I don't know. Little history lesson for you.
They will,
and
this
is a difference. But this is still a different. I'm pointing out a difference between the vocabulary of Protestants versus the vocabulary of Catholics and Orthodox. We still believe the same things. We use a different vocabulary. We get all crosswise about these concepts. We haven't defined the concepts and truly understand what the other side means.
Yeah, less fighting over words, guys. It's Nick.
Calvin does address this in his Calvin's Institute, so I suggest reading that. But that's about all I'm going to say.
Well, Nick, what is it you keep saying? No enemies to the right of me. It's kind of what you're saying here. Is yeah, I don't agree with you on everything. Doesn't mean I'm not going to work with you.
Well, and I try to understand where people come from as well. So that's another mistake that you can also make of those who you think they're actually your enemies, but you find out like, no, it's just a misunderstanding.
Words are concepts. And two different people can have the same concept and express them in different words and get all crosswise about the words they're using, yet be in agreement on the concepts.
No, it's like Trinitarian language between the East and West.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you see some of the same traits in that Lee talked about that they're of Lee, also expressed in Jackson. Now here's what I'm going to talk about: courage. We haven't talked much about that, and it's kind of related to resilience, sure. Courage. Says his personal courage was of the truest temper, but the only true courage is moral courage, and this was so perfect in him that it had absolutely changed his corporeal nature. No man could exhibit a more calm indifference to personal danger, a more perfect self-possession and equanimity in the greatest perils. The determination of his spirit so controlled his body that his very flesh became impassive. The nearest hissing of bullets seemed to produce no quiver of the nerves. When cannonballs hurtled across his path, there was no involuntary shrinking of the bridle hand. The power of concentration was of unrivaled force in his mind, and when occupied in profound thought or inspired with some great purpose, he seemed to become almost unconscious of external things. This was the true explanation of that seeming recklessness with with which he sometimes exposed himself on the field of battle.
Hey, Nick, we were talking earlier about the SEALs and how the SEALs that actually make it
Yeah.
through Hell Week aren't the big, strong guys. How
No.
many times have we seen the big, strong guys who thought that they were gonna be like Stonewall here, turn into puddles of goo?
Yep.
And I mean, this is why Hell Week and all of Buds is first and foremost a mental exercise. And it's why every SEAL you talk to, and I've talked to SEALs in person too, and they all say every one of them agrees that Buds is first and foremost a mental challenge and a challenge of determination. So, we're talking about the determination of spirit. That is more than anything else what the SEALs want. They want a determination of spirit. They want the power of concentration too, because you have to be
Mhm.
able to take literal hell being thrown at you, dive into that room anyway, and still hit your
Yep.
mark with in almost inhuman accuracy, which you can't
Yes.
do if you don't have these features. You just can't do it.
This man was a man of true grit, intelligent, courageous, and look at the calm in the midst of such chaos. There's a reason why we want SEALs, and if we had more of them, but instead we have the woke bullshit that make
Well, the woke bullshit's easy. Being a SEAL is not easy, and I will be the first to say
no,
I am not that guy.
nope. But they have my respect.
Yeah, they have mine too. I've talked to them. They're something else.
So courage, resilience, patience, calmness, yet decisiveness in the midst of hell being thrown at you. All right. Also, he says his ideas of discipline and subordination were strict. This is where Dabney's gonna actually criticize Stonewall here. So, his ideas of discipline and subordination were strict, and he was exacting of his subordinates in proportion as their rank approximated his own. It was his maxim that he who would govern others must himself set the example of punctilious obedience. If he found in an officer a hearty and zealous purpose to do all his duty with a willing and self-sacrificing courage and devotion, he was to him the most tolerant and gracious of superiors, overlooking blunders and mistakes with unbounded patience, repairing them by his own exertions without even a sign of vexation. But if he believed that his subordinates were self-indulgent or contumacious, he became a stern and exacting master, seeming even to watch for an opportunity to visit their shortcomings upon them. It must in candor be added that by this temper he was sometimes misled into prejudice, and during his career a causeless friction was produced in the working of his government over several gallant and meritorious officers who served under him. This was almost the sole fault of his military character, that by his jealousy of intentional inefficiency, he diminished the sympathy between himself and the general officers next his person, by whom his orders were to be executed. Had he been able to exercise the same energetic authority through the medium of a zealous personal affection, he would have been a more perfect leader of armies. So there's good and there's bad, even in some of the best leaders.
This
You mean we're all human?
Yeah.
this analysis comes from Robert Louis Dabney, his chief of staff, a man who served under and respected Stonewall Jackson.
And would have been present everywhere with him.
And yet he was willing, didn't shirk from pointing out, the flaw in Stonewall Jackson. He probably knew of others. But, okay, this also points out that Stonewall Jackson chose Robert Louis Dabney as his chief of staff. Not Robert Louis Dabney was not a yes man. He was going to tell the truth, and Stonewall still wanted him there because that's the kind of man he wanted around him. So even this proves that Stonewall Jackson was a good leader because he surrounded himself with a really smart man who could recognize his flaws.
So what you're saying, Steve, is what we were talking about before. It's better to have a smart man who disagrees with you a little bit, but is you're both focused on the same mission than it is to have a bunch of sycophants, is the word, and yes men telling you everything you want to believe and hear about yourself.
Right.
Yes.
But notice how he values people that are about the cause and self-sacrificing for the cause, that have courage. He's willing to overlook other faults.
And we talked about this a little bit in our gaps episode, how we don't think much is going to change over the next 4 years. Not nearly as much as people seem to think is going to change. We didn't get a whole lot into why we thought that, but I think this episode, you're looking at a whole lot of why we don't think much is going to change. And no, I'm actually not talking about our leaders here specifically, but I'm talking about the fact that even the men who would hold themselves up as leaders, they barely understand that there is a mission, that they barely acknowledge that there might even need to be one.
Hey, Nick, can you scroll back up to the previous page? I want to make a brief.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But if he believed that his subordinates were self-indulgent or contumacious, he became a stern and exacting master. I don't know what that word contumacious means.
I'll look it up.
They use it a lot in church. It's a throwaway word. It means stubborn, willingly disobedient.
Obstinate.
Oh. Can I replace this? Self-indulgent and contumacious with some lacking humility? Let me read it. But if he believed that his subordinates were lacking in humility, he became a stern and exacting master, blah, blah, blah. So maybe in subordinates who are also leaders of their people, could it be that Stonewall wanted men who were responsible, accountable, and had the humility underneath him to know that they're good leaders? And if they lacked this trait, or whatever traits were similar to this, he judged them immediately, and then he wasn't so quick to give them the benefit of the doubt after that.
Yep.
I'm just guessing here. I really don't know, but I can see myself doing that.
Well, one of the ways that you can, particularly with older text, that you can use to determine if the text is valid, for lack of a better term, is to replace it with words and see if, does this idea hold weight if I change the word out? And does it still mean the same thing? And in this case, I think that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the only point I wanted to make.
Good. It's a good point. Thank you, Steve. So if somebody does not have respect for the hierarchy and is not zealous for the mission, yeah, you might not be a good leader. Or a subordinate to a good leader.
But that does not mean that these people will not seek out positions of leadership, because positions of leadership come with what?
Power, prestige.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you must always be on guard for who your leaders are. And in the military, they will tell you that the good leaders tend to not have good subordinates. The subordinates tend to misbehave. Men want to follow good leaders. We do.
They get stuck at colonel, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, there's probably something to that.
Or even lower than that.
Yeah,
Because
majors.
they don't kiss their right ass or something like that.
Majors, I don't know. They're probably stuck at.
They didn't learn how to kiss political ass yet. Is that why they get stuck?
Well,
I think they're stuck at majors. Lieutenant colonels rise, oftentimes reach that in merit. And then it's become so political, the lieutenant colonels are not willing to kiss enough ass to become full bird colonel.
well, in the U.S. military specifically, colonels, full birds require a Senate confirmation. Lieutenant colonel is the last you can make on pure merit.
Interesting. Well, I'll get to his legacy, and we're almost done here. So he died prematurely. He was hit scouting out the enemy, and he's hit by friendly fire. Had his arm amputated, then he caught pneumonia and eventually perished. He says other countries and ages may have witnessed such a national sorrow, but the men of this generation never saw so profound and universal grief as that which throbbed in the heart of the Confederate people at the death of Jackson. Women who had never known him, save by the fame of his virtues and exploits, wept for him as passionately as for a brother. The faces of the men were black with dismay as they heard that the tower of their strength was fallen. He was, to his fellow citizens, the man of destiny, the anointed of God to bring deliverance for his oppressed church and country. They had seen his form leading the van of victory with such trust as the ancient Hebrews reposed in their kings and judges when they went forth to turn to flight the armies of the aliens. His soldiers trusted in his prestige with a perfect faith, for they had seen fortune perch so regularly upon his flag that the fickleness of her nature seemed to be changed for him into constancy. Jackson's corpse, when fighting under his eye, always assailed the enemy with a certain expectation that victory, and nothing but victory, was to be the issue. His commander in chief, who best knew the value of his sleepless vigilance, his industry, his wisdom and counsel, and his vigor and action, appreciated his loss most fully of all. Men were everywhere speculating with solemn anxiety upon the meaning of his death. They asked themselves, has God taken the good man away from the evil to come? In one conclusion, all agreed that the imitation of Jackson's example by his countrymen would make his people invincible, and their final triumph absolutely certain. That this was the practical lesson set forth by God in his life and death. Robert Louis Stanley. Any thoughts, guys?
Well, I find it interesting that somebody who displays the traits of leadership can inspire men to such a point that even after he's dead, they still want to continue to live as he inspired them. That's a leader.
Yes. And they still do to this day. Lee and Jackson
Yeah.
still inspire men down to this day.
Kinda, yes. But the South in the late 1800s, 1890, 1902, 1910, 1920. The leaders of the North saw the spirit and honor among the Southern men. And they recognized the leadership and they said, yeah, these men are deserving of honor And so put up statues. Yes, these exemplify the characteristics that we want. And the South had these statues up until what, the last 5 years?
2020.
And then, oh, we need to tear these down because they were pro-slavery. No, you dumb shit. This was not primarily about slavery. These were honorable men. These were heroes of the South. They exemplified virtues in leadership, and honoring them is a proper thing to do. We become so superficial and shallow that now we need to tear down these, and you're destroying their heritage of people in the South. And actually, you are dishonoring the North because we honor our worthy opponents. Because just because we are at odds does not mean they're not men of honor. Does not mean that he and I have the same goal. We're just on opposite sides. I think we've lost something.
Well, we've made these concepts subordinate to the political. Because they said something I don't like, I can't, not only can I not listen to what other things they had to say, I must destroy the last vestiges of them. That is, look, I have a
You
different
throw all
view.
history in the dumpster bin then.
Right. Well, the communists would actually prefer to do that. And we might even get into that one day. But look, Nick and I have differing views on the war, and we've hashed some of that out privately. But even
Yep.
I can recognize that, and I think a lot of Northerners can recognize that Stonewall was a brilliant leader of men. Like,
Yeah.
you give honor and respect to those who've earned it, regardless of what side they're on, regardless of whether or not you politically agree with a position they held. Look, there's positions that I hold that I'm sure that Nick and even Steve would agree with politically, and that has never once been a trouble for any of us because we do not hold politics in such high regard as to make it our idol.
And you can the purity spiral. You can be so pure that you end up by yourself
Mm-hmm.
and have no connection at all with the past. And then you actually, therefore, have nothing to teach the future.
You don't even have anything to offer the present.
Right. Just destruction.
Yeah, well, okay, yes, you do have that to offer the present. Yes, we'll go with
Look,
that.
guys, this is about leadership. This is about leadership. And you can get leadership principles from your enemies. You can get them from people that you really disagree with, but nonetheless, they still have some virtuous characteristics that are worthy of emulation. I personally think Alexander the Great was a terrible pagan, but there's much to emulate. There's much to learn from. He exemplified great leadership. You know, you may not like all these guys, but the truth that they represented is still viable. So, courage, resilience, intelligence, decisiveness, and understanding subordination. Understanding the hierarchy and not being threatened by those that you have around you, but willing to use them for the common purpose. And your goal is not your woman. Your purpose and mission is not your woman. No.
It's that particular observation has been a huge turning point in my life. With my ex, my goal was my woman because I was told that that's what it should be.
Yep.
With my
That's what the
current
church
wife,
teaches.
yeah, exactly. That's what the church teaches. With my current wife, she is not my goal and my purpose. And she's loving this every minute of it.
It also frees her.
Yes, it does.
He took her off the
So
pedestal.
yeah, and he does correct her.
Mhm.
What? It works. It because your goal, your purpose is a greater purpose.
Yep.
And you kind of have to bring her in line sometimes to get her focused on the greater purpose.
Yep.
And yeah, okay, she gets hurt in the moment, but she comes around. And you know what? All women do that. That's
Yep.
not.
Yep.
You're gonna have to risk offending someone in the short term to get them back focused on the long term. So, in closing, I'm going to say, you know, we touched on offensive being, uh, you lose if you take the defensive point. If you become defensive, typically you lose. Earlier, we talked about agree and amplify. You know, when an opponent comes to you or says something, if you agree and amplify, you are taking the offensive. You're not saying, no, 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 you're a bad man. Oh, yeah, I'm a real
Yeah.
bad man.
No, that
Okay.
I am the asshole.
And then here's how bad I am. And then you say it with a smile. Okay, now you're not defending yourself against the accusation. You're agreeing and you're taking the offensive position and pushing it further and now changing it and laughing. So which one wins? It's agree and amplify is don't be defensive if you want to be a good leader. And a simple thing in the manosphere is agree and amplify.
We could probably use a little more of it based on some of the bullshit that's gone down this weekend. Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Don't get so butthurt,
Sure.
guys.
Well, you have any closing thoughts, Plutarch?
I said most of them. That I am glad we're doing this. I'm glad we get to do this again next week because I love conversations like this. We took way too long to get halfway through the material that we had, but
Yep.
you know,
Not really. We needed a good conversation about this.
we did.
We needed to go around from different aspects. We don't have many people watching us right now, but hopefully they'll come back and watch us because this is really important.
Yeah.
Well, and this is something that to me personally I view as absolutely critical for the coming decades even. We are entering a time where, you know, everyone particularly now thinks that things are going to get a lot better. They're not. And we are entering a time where things are going to get worse and you're not going to understand why. And a large part of it is the leaders that you have. And no, I'm not actually specifically referring to Trump. His power is actually very limited. I'm actually more referring to the voices that you donate your time to, the people that you choose to lead your thoughts. I think I said early on that how we are raised, when we're talking about Alexander the Great, how we are raised to think is critical to how we understand the world and how we view our ability to shape the world. Alexander the Great was taught by, you know, highly intelligent men and was able to apply,
Aristotle.
yeah, Aristotle, no less. And he was able to apply this to conquer the world. Us men, we're not conquering the world anymore, and we don't know why. And part of it is a lack of leadership. Yes, it's a lack of leadership amongst our elders and political classes, but that's almost a secondary to who we give our time and attention to in our own lives. I listen to my dad all the time. The man is wise beyond his years, in my opinion. Now, there's people who might disagree with him, although you guys have talked to him. I listen to him because he's wise, and my life has been better for it. Some of you are lucky enough to have pastors out there who aren't stuffed up with egalitarianism and complementarianism, and you guys get to listen to some wise pastors. And there are good leaders out there, but you have been trained to ignore them. And that's why I think this topic is so important, is because you have been trained to ignore them and put the people the who represent the flashiest version of these characteristics, Jim Bro strength over Stonewall Jackson's unflinching character in the face of literal hell. That's my rant diatribe. This is a topic it's going to be fun to see how we weave it in over the next few episodes. Speaking of, next week.
There we go.
Next week, we're going to turn it around a little bit, and we're going to spend some time. I said I'm going to give you guys the keys to the political kingdom, and I am. And I'm going to do it by talking about Nietzsche, which makes sense to no one, because the philosophical arenas are dense and inscrutable, and I had to have this pointed out to me by somebody who actually knew what they were talking about. A lot of what you're going to hear next week is based on a paper that was written 30 years ago, and I don't agree with everything in it, but he makes some incisive points that I want to draw out. So
wait a minute. This stuff come from someone who's smarter than you?
As a matter of fact, it does.
Great, cool.
An elder philosopher. He's still alive, but he's an emeritus type now. Some of it comes from that. Some of it comes from people who just, I've been talking with people who they studied philosophy as their school career, so they just know more than I. They can point me in the right direction. But we're gonna. The reason that leadership matters is because as we move forward, and the question is going to become, who do we want to lead the next version of ourselves that we're creating? And we are creating another version of ourselves. It's why we did 2 weeks ago talking about the past and the generational cycles. But yeah, so we're going to, and we're also probably going to have some things to say about the red pill as we do it. So, sorry guys, I don't have the notes ready yet. That's going to be a weekend project for me. And I'll probably talk to my philosopher friend again to tighten things up like I did last weekend. So yeah, that's what we're doing on Monday. Sounds like Wednesday we're doing part 2 of leadership.
Part 2, but it's biblical stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Wait, we've talked secular all night. So are we going to learn anything about leadership from the biblical perspective that's different than we talked about today? Or is it going to be supportive?
But mostly, it's going to be mostly supportive, but there's also going to be greater forms.
Okay.
Interesting.
If you want to go Platonic, but I'm not Platonic, but yeah, if you want to go that way, sure. Greater forms.
You mean you can use the tools that somebody taught you without agreeing with everything they said? What is this madness, Nick?
Okay. But yeah, so biblical leadership next week.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Guys, if you liked what you heard tonight, please give us a like. If you have an idea or something you want to expound on or disagree with, leave us a comment. And if you know some men who are aspiring leaders, or maybe you yourself are kind of looking at the field out there and going, what's up with all the leaders around here? What's going on with them? Please share this video. our primary goal is not to get subs ourselves. Our primary goal is to get these ideas out there, and that's done by you guys going forth and sharing. And if you want to hear more,
Right, guys.
you can give us a sub. So, yeah, we will see you next week.
All right. Later, guys.
All right.